connected to people, but also there was a lot of dream work that would happen as a child as well. And one of the earliest memories I have was that I think around the age of 17 or 18, I wanted to seek out an actual spiritual guide. So I came across, I was aware of a specific guide, and he was in India. He was a spiritual guide, and there was no way for me to really connect with him. So I came to know that you can actually write a letter requesting some sort of initiation. And this is happening like when I was 18. So myself and two friends who were sisters, we decided, let's all write our letters and send it out and see what happens, And I remember before I could even mail that letter out, this same guide appeared in a dream and I was initiated. So that to me later on gave me sort of insights as to my way of training. And it was always like, I never met this guide ever physically, but there was this connection. And, through that telepathic sort of connection where you're not connected to someone physically, but they are, there's guidance. And then fast forward, same thing happened when I was coming to Saudi Arabia, and then I had to experience this mirroring soul, which still baffles me till today. So it's like an experience of myself through another, but where you get to a point where you don't know the other or yourself, and you just see yourself in the other, and so forth. So that led to a lot of things for me. And what I realized was that in this path where we're trying to seek out guides, the guide is basically just an illusion, like a mirage. And the guide essentially is to bring you back to yourself. If that guide is reconnecting you to you, then that guide is fulfilling his or her role. Because if the guide is making you dependent on him or her, then that is not necessarily, initially that happens. There's always that, just like the child has to wean from the mother. But as part of the training, the guide has to bring you back into that full circle, back to your center and when you come back to your center, in my personal experience, I noticed the guide just vanishes as if they never existed. And then, you're detached, you're left, but then you're only left because you've been equipped and you've been dressed with what is necessary to connect to your own inner guidance. And so that guide's role is fulfilled in making you go back to yourself and dressing you with whatever is necessary and whatever that guide is appointed to do, because not every guide is supposed to do the A to Z curriculum, right? So that guide has a role. And so I started experiencing many guides, female as well as male, mainly from the Sufic tradition, but not necessarily. So that's what would happen, was that when the guides would disappear, I just, I was brought back to this whole idea that really there is nothing in existence but you, and that guide was really just a manifestation of you. You dealing with yourself. And when you find yourself, or whatever it is that you're supposed to reconnect to, then the guide vanishes, just like you approach a mirage thinking, there's water there, and you go there and there's really nothing there. But there is a reflection you see in the mirage. So it is there, but it's not there. And that's how it's been. Even one of my major guides, when I went to Egypt, I don't want to go into that story again because it'd be like, no point. I think in one of the previous lessons, I talked about something in Egypt. something that happened. Yeah, I did. Okay. So yeah, and this guide, I mean, she really did her magic. And what she did was, so she basically plugged me into a guide from the other side. I know I've always read and I've heard about people's experience about spirit guides. And so I actually had that experience. So, and this particular guide is so alive in my life that it's like crazy. And it's not crazy, but it's beautiful. And yeah, it's I don't really, you can't really articulate in words, you know, these sort of things, but it's been a means for me to be discovering, you know, myself and the many layers within me. And essentially, I find that to be very healing, that there is no actual, there are physical guides, but then that deep connection with this invisible guide, which I read earlier, was really just to know her, to know me, and to see, you know, the guidance in everything. And yeah, it's all real. And yes, and later, sorry, yeah, a part of my journey, I was actually commissioned or given, I don't know what the name is, but in the Sufi sort of understanding is that, you know, you're an initiate, but then you're you're asked to also be a means to collect souls, I guess, to be a guide on the path. But that is sort of weird when you say that, because if you're being a guide on the path, you're not really guiding anyone to yourself. It's back to you. So then how could you be the guide? You just serve as a mirror, a reflection. So the guide is really a mirror of just you. And so, yeah, I remember that happened a few years ago, and I was like thinking they've got it wrong. I don't really have much to say, and I don't know what they're talking about. But, you know, sometimes when you're asked by individuals who are of higher awareness, and they're not speaking basically from themselves. This is the thing with this idea of a spiritual lineage. That guide is not anchored in his or her ego, rather they're effaced. That ego has been taken care of, not demolished or anything, but just, you know, in check. So that person is given you know, guidance from these chains that lead back to, let's say, the head of the chain, which is in the Sufi path, all chains lead back to the Prophet Muhammad, but then that goes beyond, and that goes it's coming from a divine source, that channeling. So the guide is speaking, but that guide is not speaking because he or she is speaking. They're just transmitting. They're transmitting from a chain of masters. And so I took it as that. So I didn't really consciously like grasp that whole thing, but I realized later that it's not really sometimes a conscious understanding, and things will come, you know, things will start making sense, and the dots will connect, and you have to trust. So if somebody is seeing a potential in you that you don't see, sometimes just, you know what, like, you know, when you're under arrest and you're like, I give up, like, yeah, whatever, just give up and submit to that person who sees something in you that you don't see. And maybe you will see that if you trust eventually. And I believe everyone will. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, that's it. So I'm here to serve. That's all I can do, really. And I think that's all we all want to do, essentially, just to serve and be of service.